back in 2014, the famed Tommy Robinson said this: "We need a new England where all religions and colours feel proud of our flag and recognise how important our identity and culture is."
Hello and welcome to the Mark and Pete Show. This week we asked the question, should Tommy Robinson be found guilty of contempt of court? Well, the ex-English Defence League leader Tommy Robinson has been found in contempt of court, and this is based around his Facebook live broadcast of defendants in a criminal trial. Now, to be specific, he was found guilty of interfering with the trial of a sexual grooming gang at Leeds Crown Court in May 2018. A little while ago, you might say. But two High Court judges have found his conduct amounted to a serious interference with the administration of justice. Now, the court ruled that the 36-year-old from Luton committed contempt by breaking reporting restrictions. Now, Robinson, whose real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon, had denied any wrongdoing on this matter and said that he'd only referred to information that was already in the public domain. What's probably more significant here is that following this particular verdict, which actually came at the Old Bailey, he told the media that he had been convicted for who I am, not what I have done. Unfortunately, Mr. Robinson, perhaps your reputation carries the beast of burden. Doing the donkey work, as a rule, requires lawyers to defend you en masse. But injustice is stubborn as a mule when the law is a total ass. Well, Clergyman Pete, that might be perhaps the sentiment of Mr. Robinson, but do you think that he is really guilty of contempt of court?
No, I don't, and the reason is this: he was broadcasting live on Facebook a video that was available for some time afterwards. So I watched it live and reviewed it as well. And what I see him is reporting on a court case, not showing the people involved in the court, not the people who have been accused. And when he made comments about it, in public, outside of the building, the decision of the jury had already been made. So he cannot be in contempt of court. That just doesn't make any sense. And in fact, those points that I just made were made in a review of the case, which was why it didn't proceed any further at the time. And however, there's now been an appeal against that. It's appeal against the appeal that we're talking about here. And it's been brought back again. The same point has been made. This time, he's been found guilty. How can that be? What's changed? Maybe they just put more pressure on. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well,
and overseas reporting outlets, including the rebel media who support Tommy Robinson, are reporting on how Britain has become a bit of a police state because of this. So it's not looking good abroad for people's view of Britain.
Well, indeed. Now, we're going to stick with the business of religion, the moral aspect.
Yeah, sure.
So we'll keep it with you for the time being. And then I'll talk about the religion of business in terms of, what he did as a journalist. But let's keep with the moral argument.
Yeah.
Now, Dame Victoria Sharp, who is one of the senior judges, said that the court would consider a penalty to impose on Tommy Robinson because it could go up to a maximum penalty of 2 years.
Yeah.
But this is the key. According to the judges and the findings, the Robinson breached the reporting restrictions imposed by the trial. Now, you yourself said that you'd seen live streaming.
Yes, I did.
Outside of the public entrance. And he had, and according to the judges, had basically aggressively confronted the defendants by filming them live. So that's where his misdemeanor was based. And because of the social media furore that came with it, that's where I believe that he is contempt of court. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts on that are that there were two different instances. On one occasion, he did film the defendants going into court. Why there should be I don't understand how that's a restriction. That should not be a restriction. I'll come back to how it isn't normally in a moment. But the other thing that I would say is that on this occasion that we're talking about, so the final occasion, he wasn't filming the defendants. He was talking to people outside about, do you know what's going on in there, and trying to highlight it. So I think there are two different occasions being conflated together. That's from having seen that. The video that I saw didn't include that. That's what I'm saying, from my personal experience. However, that being the case, he certainly did at some point film them going in. So, you could say, well, if that isn't allowed, then he's guilty. Now, just coming back, as I said, I'd come back to the point. When he was being interviewed about it by the police, he did point out to them, look, you're doing it to me.
Yeah, indeed.
Doing the same thing, exactly the same thing, and no one arrested them. So it's quite obvious to any impartial outlooker that whatever your views of Tommy Robinson, he's not guilty of this particular thing. This is not here a defence of Tommy Robinson and his methods, but rather that he's not guilty of this particular thing, and so it makes you very suspicious, nervous, scared. If you're in any sort of media, as we are, if you can be put away by the government on a trumped-up charge, which this obviously is, because of the previous statements of a judge looking at the case, saying that it doesn't meet the criteria. So this is quite scary.
Well, just to conclude this point about the moral side, is it actually, are we really going to get it to the nugget here, which is actually his reputation precedes him? To your point, he has been seen as a controversial character. In some cases, he has actually been embroiled in physical violence, and that has been noted for the record. And in fact, he has often been accused of inciting riots. But to this point, is it that actually really it's his reputation that is influencing this matter? Is that where we're really getting to?
I think that this is my opinion, because coming from a moral point of view and looking at the morality, how people behave in their moral judgments, it seems to me that there's a pressure to conform to certain norms, which is you don't rock the boat when it comes to different religions. This feels helpful to people. That's one side of it. But I think there's something more dangerous. There's something more disturbing. Let me put it that way. Let me just say the crucial issue is to look at what is the court case about. What are the defendants accused of? These defendants were found guilty. Remember that he was reporting on. They were being accused of running a rape gang of young girls, particularly young white girls or young non-Muslim girls, and all of them. Almost all of those guilty, but all the people were either Muslims, or they were in the same gang or group of people as the Muslims. So these are Muslim gangs. The fact that they're Muslim is not relevant to what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, isn't it strange? Isn't it strange that politicians who have long been accused of having paedophilia and effectively statutory rape gangs operating in their midst are suddenly on the side of rape gangs? Isn't that very convenient and very worrying?
Well, potentially, and I'm sure that the listeners would have a view on that. Now, I'm going to come from the religion of business. Effectively, let's get to the facts. What is contempt of court? Because this is where contempt of court exists to ensure people get a fair trial. That's really the point of it. So the idea is that the jurors must not be influenced by anything at all that can affect the evidence that they hear in court. That is the critical point. If you are a member of the jury, you have to be impartial. So the rules apply to anyone, and that includes journalists, anyone who's on social media, and anyone who, of course, is on the jury. Now, if someone interferes with the trial or is perceived to be interfering, then the defendants could walk free. And that's the point about it. Now when we move to the next step, if you look at the aim of this, if you are deemed to be perhaps infringing this law, the maximum sentence, ironically, is 2 years in prison. So that's something that Tommy Robinson does actually face. So this is a very serious issue. But then you ask the question then, What about the more established media? So it is not unreasonable to say that actually many, many big multinational broadcast companies have actually broadcast this trial.
Yes.
And in fact, they have actually not only report on it editorially, they've also broadcast from the courts and actually filmed outside and actually talked about it openly. Now, you could argue, if you are a member of the jury, you could be influenced by the very nature of broadcast.
Yes.
Now, if an interviewer or a broadcaster, anyone who covers the case, could have an opinion. Yep. Once you bring opinion into the equation, and this is my point, and this is probably a very pedantic point, but it's the key to it, it's if you are reflecting the facts, you are conveying the point of fact, that's fine. Once you start to dig deeper, then you might be giving opinions where you might be asking experts, and there have been examples where the BBC, including in this, along with many other big broadcasters, have actually covered this case and actually given commentary on it. Once you give commentary in the same way that Tommy Robinson has done, are they not then also crossing that red line? So where is the red line?
This is exactly the point, yes.
Which is the key here, has he actually crossed the line? And more importantly, should we also have other people in the dock along with Tommy Robinson?
Well, it's the inconsistency that's the issue here. However, the thing is, I understand the point about not allowing reporting maybe outside the courthouse and saying this causes problems and that sort of thing. I understand it, but I don't agree with it. In that, as long as you're not physically preventing people going in and out of the courthouse and that sort of thing, which does happen, the BBC pester you with microphones.
Well, he was actually deemed to be filming some of the defendants going in and out of the courtroom.
Yeah. As I say, that was on a different occasion. I understand it. I certainly didn't see that happening, but it could. It could have happened at a different point. As I was watching it live, maybe it had already happened. So, but filming them is not stopping them. That's not the point I was making. Filming them should be allowed. Free speech includes, in a public area, being able to video and broadcast. And as soon as we go down the route of saying we won't allow that, then things are being done in darkness and we don't know about it, and that's worse. It's not, again, I'm just going to repeat this point, it's not supporting Tommy Robinson to say this. It's supporting free speech, and it's against the overreach of government, including the branch of government of the courts. It's overreach to stop
this is an important point, isn't it? Because it comes back to my argument, which is journalists have a right, in my opinion, to convey the news in the interest of the public, as well as the state. Now, whether somebody reports the facts, but more importantly, gives their own commentary and opinions vary. Tommy Robinson would have his own, the BBC will have their own, and any other broadcaster will have their own opinions. So, do we then have to have a law which is a little bit more liberal on the one approach to allow journalists to comment on the proceedings without actually influencing the jurors? Because the key thing here is the juror. If the juror is influenced by what is said externally, then I can see that that's where it's crossing the line. What I think needs to happen here is that how can you prove that the jurors have been influenced? And that's probably the point here. Clearly, the courts have thought that actually what Tommy Robinson did is he crossed the line and was influencing the jurors. Now, I know that there are many other cases, and we've seen this with other court cases, completely separate, where, including the BBC, ironically, have been deemed to have gone too far. They've influenced public opinion and perhaps across the line because they've either followed the police on certain well-known celebrities, or that they've actually perhaps maybe revealed some court information that they shouldn't have done. So we have to have a clear line here because I think it's too open to interpretation. I think what Tommy Robinson did is I don't think he necessarily wanted to influence the jurors. What he wanted to do was to highlight the sad case where, unfortunately, there were victims in this sexual scandal. Unfortunately, maybe with the BBC, because it's an established organisation, maybe they're not under the same scrutiny. So it comes back to, again, the point is maybe he's in the spotlight and perhaps every move that he makes is really amplified, and this is where he's going to be punished because of his reputation, not necessarily because of what he did. And is that really what, again, it comes down to?
Yes, it's it's a problem, and the deepest problem we have here, the fundamental aspect of the problem, is that if you allow just a little step of overreach by government, if you allow a removal of the ability of journalists to report on events, just that little creep allows too much power in the hands of people. Politicians are not generally well regarded. Why people seem to be happy to take the government line on things like this, just because Tommy Robinson may not speak in genteel terms. Oh, it might not be just because of that. It seems to me that it's prejudice in that way that's doing it. Allowing that to happen would mean that we have that, a creep, that subtle creep of takeover. There's a famous saying, a way of looking at this sort of problem. And that is, it's put in different ways. It's quoting in different ways. It was said by Martin Niemöller. He was known to make this comment during the war. Martin Niemöller, he was a pastor of the Lutheran Church in Germany. And it begins with this. I won't do the whole quote. It begins with him saying this: "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out. Then," and he was talking about how the Nazis took over. So, it's always said that, you've made a mistake as soon as you start comparing people to the Nazis. But, there's this sort of creep of power of government through politics and through the courts is very scary and creeping. We need to speak out, even if it's for that flipping Tommy Robinson.
Well, here's a thought. Actually, the Attorney General, Geoffrey Cox, has said that the court's decision reflected the seriousness of posting online material which risks prejudicing legal proceedings. Well, Clergyman Pete, you might be shuffling there. And he said, "I would urge everyone to think carefully about whether their social media posts could amount to contempt of court." That he added. From Tommy Robinson's point of view, I'm sure that he must be hopping mad. To box clever in a kangaroo court depends on your defence and how you fought, but being knocked out by media sport comes as a blow judged by a biased thought. Well, indeed. Listeners, why don't you let us know your thoughts? Log on to markandpete.com and let us know whether you think that Tommy Robinson was guilty of contempt of court, or perhaps you've got a different view. Join us next time for more colourful conversations with Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark.